Hello everyone. Hi. So you may want to come into the room a little bit more. All of the readings are going to be coming from this spot here, so maybe Sandy, if you... And if you want to sit down, feel free to sit down as well. We do have a few chairs if people need to sit. Also, the event is being documented tonight and being filmed. So if you have any issues with that, then please just come to me. So with that out of the way, I would just like to thank the co-curators of this exhibition. So that's CHRIS MCCABE, who has been an absolute pleasure to work with over this entire process, and also Magnus Rina of the Sir Denis Mahon Foundation. And we really have to be incredibly grateful to the Sir Denis Mahon Foundation for allowing this to take place. They've been incredibly generous, and it's been such an incredible experience to bring William Blake to Peckham. It's very special for Flat Time House, and I think quite special for Peckham as well. And I'm incredibly grateful that you've all been able to turn up to this event. Secondly, I'd also like to thank all of the poets who have collaborated on this project with us. So that's the poets tonight: CHRIS MCCABE, Niall Mcdevitt, Sandhu Iain Sinclair, but also those who will be speaking next week. It's Keith Jarrett, Robert Montgomery, and Tamar Yoslov. And we were so happy when Chris wrote to them, and everyone immediately agreed to be part of the project. For those who don't know Flat Time House, or it's your first time coming to the space, this is quite an unusual space, and the space of another artist who didn't quite fit into his time. And this was the home of the conceptual artist John Latham, and he lived here from 1983 to 2006. So those of you who want to know more about this space and the projects we can do, you can always just sign up to the mailing list or speak to me. Also, just want to point out that we created a really wonderful publication for this show as well, which you can pick up from the office. This has an essay from Chris, a really wonderful essay, and an essay from Magnus Rina also, including the poems that are also included in the show. So, I think I've thanked everyone I have to, or should. And now I'm going to hand over to CHRIS MCCABE.
Thank you, Gary. Hello, everyone.
I'll just give you this, Chris.
You good? All right. It is an unusual space. I'm going to pop up between the poets and introduce them. So please take that as a cue to go out this door and do something you need to do, or you can crawl to that window, or there's another door down there. If you need to take a break, get a drink, whatever, please don't feel that you've got to be stuck in this spot. The event's going to take about an hour. We're going to have the more extended versions of the poems that are on the wall. And this is really important because the way we thought about this exhibition was that William Blake's words should be a big part of it. Obviously, these paintings by Blake include the poems by Thomas Gray, but we felt we needed some of Blake's words. So on the glass window, you can see this wonderful quote from the Bard. And we also felt that contemporary poetry, or at least contemporary poets who are in some way illuminated by Blake's work, should be given a central place in the exhibition. So it wasn't one of these exhibitions where the visual art goes up and then we go, oh, we need to have a programme of events. What should we do? It was the other way around. It was conceiving the idea that poetry will be at the heart of it. And a little bit like Blake's vision of Albion, which is an island, but it's also a giant that gets up and walks. These events, these readings, and the walk we're going to do, Niall Mcdevitt and I, on Sunday through Peckham, they are the exhibition, okay? And of course, you're all part of it because we can't have events without you. So thank you for coming along. And I'm gonna kick things off because I've got a poem on the wall over there, and I used this commission as an opportunity, as poets often do, to build and extend on something I've been working on for about 4 years, and it's a work in poetry and prose and collage and visual poetry called Civic, and Civic is a state, but it's also a person. It's written at a time of terror, which is described by many as civil war, but it is in fact just terror. So I used the opportunity to transform my character into the bard, and without this exhibition I don't think I would ever have thought of using the word the bard, but this is what happened. And the transformation happens as a black ball of gas begins to form on the shard, so it's quite visual about the shard. Mirtazapine, migraine, citalopram, other rainfall in SSRIs. Blake didn't die for poetry, he worked as its assistant. Who would die for their art? A couple kiss at the stage door of the Old Vic. The 168 rolls onto the Old Kent Road. A pink cab turns into the cut. I won't die for this poem. Neither will Andrew Eldritch. Never William Blake. One day Europe came to Peckham. The male puppeteers were put in dressing room 17. I always heard puppeteers as puppet ears and was grateful that someone was listening. I have listened. I have listened very well. I have listened with others. Others have listened very well. I drink alone. I have listened drinking very well alone. I have drank with others listening alone. I have drank alone with others listening very well. Very well. I have listened alone drinking with others. I have listened very well. Now the bard must find a language for the interface between an app and a screen. The bard must define the action of collapsible coffee cups. By 2030, the bard must have found the word for scrolling with fury. The bard's role is to find the language for asking commuters to move down the carriage. Who else but the bard can ensure a complete migration from Office to Google Docs? The frustration of using bullet points in email is now in the hands of the bard. On the first day, the bard was sent for a roll of warp and woof. On the second day, he explored which of the WCs had the best Wi-Fi. On the third day, he was asked to contribute to the bottom line and asked where the hook was. On day 4, he struck a blank. On day 5, the bard created an orb from obsidian, elevated over the stylus of the shard. Broken analogue remixed the dialogue of the ceased, spun on electric voice phenomena. A millennia of the evicted and conscripted, freed into a wind tunnel of distortion, a telecast of oppressed. The orb splayed its sun, rotated a crinoline shellac, harvesting the outcast dialects of the city into a pattern of subjugation, an invisible murmuration of starlings, this echocardiogram of bleats and groans, encored into pity, want and ignorance, a missive to the sheeps and goats, forecasting the snowbound apocalypse. The populace watched the obsidian spin, visible from Kent, black atlas on a needle. The slaughtered of Spitalfields and Borough oxidised its carcass, gave ballast to its belly and it bloated, collapsed its slow heft on the glass, flopped like a whale impaled by a schooner, a jet moonflower expanding, breathing expansive, rigging the streets with sinuous ink, writing and writing a strange asemic verse. This, said the bard, is how language is made. He walked to the corrugated talk of the Thames, ambled the rutty banks, the waves like kittiwakes trapped in a tank, words forming, then foaming on the surface, spelling the names of London's chronologies in the silver liquid of congas. John Stowe, Thomas Dekker, John Nash, Ben Jonson, the water level rising to his waist as gulls hawked the napalm in his brain, and he stood sluice washed, a mound of mountain flesh, with the orb accelerating its onyx. The bard spoke to the river, asked it to speak the chronology of now, the one who could broker terror war into civil terror. And the river wrote one name, civic, in rivulets of clear cicatrix. End the myth, sick it, pause civic, so far the cult of the bardic, so far indelible black crop, so far narrative, so far symbol, so far city as backdrop, so far figure, so far image, so far the torsion between creation, greed, desire and dominance, so far ragged outcrop, so far brick, so far facade, so far trick of light, so far trap, so far optic. Thank you. I'm going to introduce our next poet. Sometimes you just meet people at the right moment. And I first met Karen Sandhu at an event at the Austrian Embassy in October. And her event really changed quite a literary soiree into a happening. And afterwards we talked, and I discovered that Karen is doing a PhD on John Latham. So she was the first poet who came to mind for this exhibition here. Karen has published her work in many places, the Archive of the Now, Blazevox. She's collaborated with the ICA. She has performed at Battersea Arts Centre, at the Arnold Feeney in Bristol, and she makes the most amazing book objects. Maybe you describe them, artist books, however you want to phrase that. Please forgive me if I got that wrong. But she is at the fore, I think, of a new generation who is working at the intersection of poetry and visual art, and visual poetry and performance art, and really taking us through the hinterlands into new territory. So please put your hands together for Karen Sandhu.
Sorry. Just extract this. Thank you.
The oak tree wears a dress. For Flat Time House in memory of William Blake and John Latham. Instructions for the field fight. So I unfold and I lift and I wrap and I lean and I twirl and I lift and rise and cover and move, left, release, dip, cover, pull, hold and watch. And move and yank and twirl, so I unfold and I lift and I wrap and I lean, to twirl, to shuffle, maybe drop, rise, fall, lift and hold and twirl to cover, to lift, to fall, to rise, to shuffle, to wear, to hold, to lift, to unwrap, and to wrap, to unfold. Twirl, yank, and hold, and be equipped and ready, and fight, and shuffle, and wrap, and hold, and whirl, to twirl, and lift, and shuffle, and drop, and rise, and cover, and pull, and hold, and watch, and move, and yank, and twirl, and fold, and pull, and move, and release, and lift, and hold, and cover, and twirl, and lift, and move, to hold, to cover, and lift, and release, be, and hold, and twirl, and cover, and lift, and release, and be, and here. I arrived here on those trains that lean into the bends so suddenly, so quick, that low dip and whoop rise, and now I'm here. And I'm stood here and you're stood there, and I wish you'd come closer so that we could form a happy huddle, lance to lance. But you won't do that. You're easily agitated, you're skittish, timorous, you're nervy and mousy, and you're unsure, mostly unsure, I think. But anyhow, going back to me standing here looking up, and you standing there looking at me as I look up into that second floor up there, the window over there, it gleams. It gleams this shimmery, pinkish, bluish, copperish, oh, and greenish light emits. Waves of light emitting from that window and from your eyes, haggard. I arrived here naked, like the fabled warrior Dianthus who fed Cadwallados. Oh, 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 cold tongue. My tongue licks the cold ice that dangles from the shelf of my window. Oh, and the flowers that sit there are dead, and sticky sap has hardened in the crust of my breakfast bowl. Old mold. Can you hear those shrieks of death? Those cries that flash in shimmery, pinkish, skittish copper? Feet fast approach and they puncture through our doors. Hurry, hurry, to the field! But I'm naked. I must dress quickly. So I unfold and I lift and I wrap and I twirl and I remove and push and pull and lift and move and wrap and hold and twist and pull and move and lift and wrap and twist and move and pull and lift and move and twirl and left and right and twist and pull and lift and move and pull, tight, to twirl, to shuffle and move and hold. And now I am equipped and ready for the field fight. I arrived here and met with A.E. Urizen. E.M. Ork, he was late, but bought us these dinky little Danish pastries. So we all sat together, like you are now, like these famished eagles tearing into flesh. We spoke about our obsession with cancel culture. For example, if I say something like, "Learn the tenor of my song," Orc cancels me out and then tells Horizon of this cancelling out, and they decide fiercely fast together to cancel me out together. And then I'm cancelled, not just what I said, but what I am. Can you hear those shrieks of death? They're coming closer, lifting and rising, twirling, and you're being watched from the second floor up there, looking down at you. I'm cancelled, by the way. Did I tell you I'm cancelled? I'm smeared with gore and I stand here ghostly pale, gored with my many gaping wounds. But it could be that I cancel culture you out first, or maybe Orc instead. Or perhaps Horizon is lanced by my cancel culture arm. We are, after all, the three fatal sisters. So going back to me standing here in front of you and you all stood there, I arrived here reimagining what home might be like. You know, burnt toast and forests and old TV reruns, fish fingers maybe under the grill, neighbouring mountainsides, bell bottoms, open fields, cotton jeans, those kinds of things. I press play and all I can hear are the shrieks of an agonising king. Can you hear him? He says, "Hurry, hurry, hurry, hurry to the field, learn the tenor of my song. Hurry, hurry to the field, learn the tenor of my song. Hurry, hurry to the field, learn the tenor of my song. Hurry, hurry." I distract myself by looking through that window again, second floor up. Shimmery, greenish, pinkish blue. And what I decide to do is head outside over there, to lean against that giant oak. You would have passed it on your way here, the one besides the zebra crossing. But you were too agitated, weren't you, to notice it? You were too skittish, you were too nervy and unsure it was ever really there. And those branches of the naked oak tree I have dressed in paper, a paper dress that rustles and floats and flaps, and it's pinkish blue, and it's green, and it's orange with these copperish notes, and it floats and it flaps, the oak tree.
Thank you, Karen. All right. We're now going to have our penultimate poet. I'm going to introduce Niall Mcdevitt. I don't think he'll need that seat. I don't think you'll need the seat, Niall. Niall is a poet, connector of the living and dead. He's an activist, a psychogeographer. He's the author of 3 collections of poetry. The most recent is called Firing Slits, Jerusalem Coal Portage, and it's really resurrecting this lost tradition of coal portage, the hawking or peddling of underground books, which I think really nicely connects with William Blake in this exhibition. Niall also leads tours, literary tours, or walking lectures. You'll be doing one of these with me on Sunday. And there's tours cover William Blake, Shakespeare, Yeats. And I've got this theory that if we put all the coordinates for Niall's walking tours into Google Maps, it will quite literally break the internet. Do you think that? Never tried it, but I think that's what happened. He's been described by Heathcote Williams as writing work that is savagely witty, and I think that's what he's produced for this exhibition. So please put your hands together for Niall Mcdevitt.
Thank you. So the old Welsh bard meets Edward I on Snowdonia and curses Edward I, cancels the Plantagenets, but there's still about 9, Edward and then 8 other kings to go before the cancellation takes effect. Then the bard foresees that from Wales a new dynasty comes, and Queen Elizabeth will herald in the golden age of the poets. So this is my response. Psychohistorical sonnets. Edward I. I have thrown a blood shadow on your island to encrust on the map like black puddings, 1,000 scabs, congealing wax, enseaming chronicles. I cut native clay into chunks of victual, a hot, wet, bloody geography. The stone keeps and arrow slits of my legacy defend. England nods as my Frankish engines creak through night's gore to expulsions, parcels wrapped in law, from ploughed south to harrowed north. The shade of my shanks is a tree of death to meet giant killers with royal ordnance. Edward II. Crownless, the foliage on my chins, a heraldry fending off no barons, the fop of yore, ill-equipped, Fronglay unheeded by all. Son of the hammer, lain on Scots anvil, I am Europe's fool in the sports news. Aide de camp quartered as Londoners bawl for the princeling. Unpurpled, no wardrobes of regalia, unseated by what I most fear, a female, the worm of manhood, eats its corpse, exhales its last. Crusader, I chase the glow of irons, welding inside me this satanic spine. Edward III. We now contend with God's darkness, his thunder of moraine. I close my eyes, I espy the Black Sea, a dust falling off the skulls of magnates. Black bulbs illume the paling forms as the eyes of the commonality close like candles, and black ears block Latin prayers. We elite, we gartered, are no Arthurians, hating the icon of bondage's skeleton. No ring givers, chivalry clouded in miasma. I am half dead, my subjects half dead, and remember, they fund me, not I them. Richard II. I view from my cask the faces of simples, my head on a silver halfpenny, milking fists, levying scutage for music. The half-groat's silver platter, my fleur-de-lis crown, my effeminate locks, illegal tender, a loosening link in heredity's chain. The pauperized, the meek, are not encased in God's aura like me, but my writs falter. I cannot gild their living conditions. I've hung villains on municipal gibbets who'd crave of me one word, one touch. Henry IV. Alas, the body of monarchy holds as the body of the monarch implodes, usurper with muscle, so begins my anointment by pustules. This England is a scriptural desert into which I walk 40 days too long. Leper king, not of Jerusalem, but stiff-necked London. The Anglophone of the coronation loses lips, nose loses its bridges. A prolapsed rectum turns my throne inside out, spits innards. The holy oil in the eagle casket perfumes the mared, my swimming bones. Henry V. Le Soleil, inside armour. Le Soleil on horseback, a surplus of suns wheeling earth, attaining to the corona, alighting to the Invictus, on Haute, limbs feathered aquiline gold, on grass of Mars, mail ringed within guards, machines, daffyd gams, regal shield, falling with men to bloody flux, drink their drink, die their death, solus. Henry VI. A child in the room fathoms adults, heir to the brain pan of Charles the Mad. A great slump begins in the core of my egghead. The royal ear tires of influencers as English ponds of carp excreta. I agree with all comers to be true king in something. A great slump, a bullion famine, hums in the stomachs of roses. Contention's edict, manna falls upward out of reach. At 50, blessing the medieval city, a fetus with axe, I'm unbearable. Edward IV. The diadem floats as a football for presumptive heirs to possess it. A trio of sons, parhelions, my hour and or decade. A longshanks, I'm long as lances, vaults of rib, rugged as castles, a domineer of eyes to console for the misshape Henry. Ego and more ballooning, the table eclipses the war field. I vomit for Rome, ejaculate for royal frog spawn. Stabbing and stabbing, a death's man non-entity, filling the vacuum with penile will. Richard III. The coverture over this insane imp is blown off. The groundlings know my manners are null. Grains of sugar iced with gall. The ungulate humps on my back brim over with pus and jaundice, ill milks, mothering the spheres, liming the orbits. An impure calculus guides me home, less addition than subtraction. I'll cancel you, dining on swan, crane, heron and pigeons. The state fetishizes my cacodemon DNA. On live television, oddly, Protestants pray. Elizabeth I. Two planets align in one aura, Mars and Moon. But in black gallows of eyes, a father beheads a mother ever. This eagle of Tudor muse is untied to prow Dee's empire, to maul globalism's sea, red of the Martian hair, white of the lunar visage, make her glower intense as Lazar or Bedlamite, overseeing maps and men, wasp-waisted to lure her lords, elongated by mythology and headdress, whom W.S. coded tyrant. So, the poet's queen, racked, knived, jailed, and starved her scrivenery, shedding quills with age. Like Macbeth, she got no kings, pale vampiress. Her fangs fell out, gnawing Ulster's lymph. Her locks fell out, thorns wilted, and time, in the form of a sullen youth, besieged her citadel. So for me, that hoary old Welsh bard, it reminds me of a friend of mine who died in 2017, Heathcote Williams, half Welsh, half English. That Williams is the giveaway. So through knowing him, I found out that that word ordnance at the end of Edward I, royal ordnance, if you read his great poem Royal Babylon, Royal Ordnance was the previous name of the military industrial company called BAE Systems. One other oral note, expulsions. So, okay, if you agree that, you know, it's the done thing for Normans to conquer England and then move in and try and cancel out the Celts, fair enough. But Edward I also oversaw the expulsion of the Jews in 1290. So it kind of proves by algebra he's one of the bad guys. But if you think of what's happening with Windrush today, just no one learns from history. It's just such a bad look. But the other oral note I want to say is this Gray's vision of the golden age of poets. Well, the era of genius was the 1590s, but by that stage Elizabeth was cracking down on the poets. So Thomas Kyd was tortured pretty much to death. Christopher Marlowe was assassinated. Ben Jonson was jailed. Thomas Nash had to go into hiding, and so on. Even Shakespeare's company was interrogated for a performance of Richard II. So it wasn't all roses, Thomas Gray. So I'd like to just finish. This is a poem that's on the theme. I was writing history stuff anyway. This is Julie Goldsmith, my partner. This is her miniature painting of a stabbed in the eye Marlowe. It's on the cover of the current London magazine, and it accompanies this kind of tragic elegy, a hymn to Marlowe. Hymn is in inverted commas. A hymn to Marlowe. Birds of the air will tell of murders past. Marlowe empurpled the state and stations of death. Archive his cloven mind as it conjugates the Latin of reality into past, present only. The future is the faces of the triumvirate. An English agent is not an English patient, crossing blood-brain barrier into night's syllogism, in time for Faustian bells to relay news to the newscasters of the hourly schism. The living stand smaller than the supine cadaver, they who never brandish truth as a scourge, Baconians to a man quantifying the blade's value. The river is the helm of Her Majesty's verge, navigating its blue arc about the Isle of Dogs. Marlowe, embalmed in the place of the skulls, is consumed by the earth of the holy boneyard. Oh, chalice misused, misunderstood by God's gulls. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're just going to do a mic swap over. Why wasn't history taught like that at school? That's what I want to know. I'm going to introduce our final reader, filmmaker, chronologer of London, novelist, poet Iain Sinclair. Iain has really mapped out contemporary London, shown us London for all its good and bad in epic works like London Orbital and Downriver. Right from the start of his writing life, he's been a poet. He is a poet. It's harder to come by because his editions of poetry are often published in copies of 10 or 12, deliberately so. And I think, you know, they go right, they bore right into the surface layers of Londoner's poetry with the kind of compact weight and sharp edges that they have. So we're really, really delighted that he's written new work for this exhibition. He's been described at various points as a magus, a shaman, and a visionary. So please welcome Iain Sinclair.
Thank you. It's been very special to hear the poets tonight, and Niall's conjurings of history reminds us, you know, so much of this Deptford, Marlowe, these things are eternal and broken down into the atoms of performance as we've seen tonight. The liveness of it, that this happens just once. The fact that you're here as witness means it doesn't happen just once. It goes on, and that cyclic nature of time is one of the aspects that John Latham brought to this particular house. Not by accident, because of the significance of Peckham Rye in the geology and geography, mythology of London. It's very significant. The paths that are crisscrossing here and the accidental witness of all of you and all of that. And what I wanted to do in this short piece is really to honour the sense of John Latham as both a poet visually, a destroyer of words, a remaker of words. The book was his essence. And also a man who was extremely interested in the physics. So that the time that Niall was describing, the 1590s, John Latham probably was there. You know, he's like John Dee. He decided to operate outside time, create his own time. And the only time I met him was in Princelet Street in Spitalfields. There's a house with a pink door that's constantly used to time travel. Every Dickens adaptation you've ever seen is filmed in this house. Well, we were there ahead of all this, and John Latham arrived and kind of converted it into a version of this by his presence. He had an extraordinary intensity and integrity that totally denied the spurious reality of the camera. The fact that he was making these statements were historic. He knew that. And that's why, in thinking about Latham, I decided that he was actually much older than William Blake, and that William Blake, in his Conjuring of Spirits, probably met John Latham. And that's, so we're working back from that. We're in the physics, and the title Mental Travailers is a reference, obviously, to Blake's Mental Travellers, which I remember reading with a huge engagement as a schoolboy, and understanding that all of this history was cyclic, that the old woman becomes a child, and so round and round and round. And John Latham, I know, even corresponded with Stephen Hawking. I don't think he got an answer, or not a very encouraging one. That's why I'm starting with Hawking. The area of the boundary of a black hole cannot decrease with time, and if two or more black holes merge to form a single black hole, the area of its boundary will be greater than the area of the boundaries of the original black holes. S.W. Hawking and G.F.R. Ellis, The Large-Scale Structure of Space-Time. That was about the only sentence I could understand in it, because the rest is in formulae, but I got there quite early, in the early 70s. Discrete events occur simultaneously or almost so, etc., across salient ridges or south-inclining alluvial humps, and where anti-gravitational weaponry once swept for invasions and Olympics, they sketch arcs and clean our local heavens as calyx of familiar space degrades in the curator's railway arch junk cosmos. Spectral Latham predeceases William Blake, while both magicians, burning like thermal lances, are numbered among the chain of stars. Curved light reaches through infinitely extended quantum crumbs, Planck time, to a black metal box that flattens, swept by paper waves into cemetery suburbs on the hill. Angelic incidents are reported, fluttering word shapes affixed to a mesh of trees, immortal rubbish. Carbonized crows rain from miasmic Heathrow skies to flare in lisping monosyllables of history over resurrected panopticons. Teach us how pressed libraries can prophesy our future weather. In those days, the event horizon for William Blake was defined by the cellular walls of his electric trap in Fountain Court between Strand and Thames. If he could smell the change of tides, he could not see the river. And he chose, so Crab Robinson informs us, never to leave those rented rooms in 2 years, labouring with and against time. He frequently rose at night, mortality pressing closer then, to record and refine his brilliant inspirations. Despite all, he woke early, always first from the marital bed to make up a sea-coal fire and put the black kettle to boil for his helpmate's bitter tea. In steam, on the dirty plain, you can still trace the lineaments of forgotten J.W. Dunn's provisional time map. It is the content, Dunn said, of the real now. That is the country of which you propose to make a map in terms of space and what we call pseudo-time. And this is how you will have to set to work if you wish that map to be a reliable guide in your science. In late retreat, Latham registered this house as a body: mind, brain, torso, hands. He sat, light switch at his shoulder, to unroll the chart. Volumes stick in the throat. Wire hooks draw flies from sticky cranial bowls. The table is laid for a Libricide's feast. Nude Newton swishes blunt compasses like a wartime windmill act. Invite guests to masticate and spit, chew, gag, display, sell. The Alice in Wonderland mirrors are bereft of text, and hooded cameras have been taught to lie. A liquid golden light drowns the valley of red-roofed suburbs, Jeff Nuttall confirmed in his scatty memoir, Trawling Hard for Myth. John Latham met me with such a steady, staring eye. There's something about Latham at such moments that is mad beyond madness. Donning Aztec costumes of books, these twin conspirators, like figures out of Canetti, stagger and faint in the wings at the Albert Hall before retiring to share Sir Malcolm Sargent's bath, and thereby avoid entirely the false parturition of the official counterculture. Indent for rogue numerals, one chipped cup of smoke, the obligatory aftertaste of eels silvering the tongue, absinthe stained through black silk stockings. I think the light of day has been somewhat fouled in translation. John Latham exhibited Story of the Rio, which was brave but not bravo, and it does not reference a Dalston cinema or a named character in popular film or song. Neither is it a variant or homage to the notorious pornographic novel put out in olive green wrappers in Paris. Seeing it as a story or history that begins minimally and becomes increasingly complex, it's natural to think of it as a history of an individual organism or of a life in general. Alternately, her lover one day takes O for a walk. So for John, there is a pair of contingent, unexplainable facts, that there is a least event of all, and that the atemporal state O exists. The existence of the state O entails, among other things, that universes develop according to the suggested diagrams of eventometry, and yes, the library is still deserted. Moving swiftly on through all of this, as you will appreciate by now, it's all happening at the same time, in the same limited space between yawn and closure, and well down the vine, let's say, beyond the peeling pink door of the interpreter's house in Princelet Street, where the noble and wasted Magus, neither cardinal nor corpse, but hovering somewhere between the two, replies. This is John Latham. For me, a book is outside of time. A book which is read begins to bring time into the organism. There's another part of it, which is a story, or the material, which is another process altogether. It's not necessarily architectural. But when we've got the time that is being read, and when we've got the idea in the mind of the person who's reading it, you have got three components, which is enough to make up the whole world of existence. There are such rich harvests of books on Peckham Rye, in furniture repositories, gathered in bulk for budget redistribution among artists plotting regeneration schemes and intervening among ethical coffee brands and artisan bakers. Tom Phillips falls under the spell of A Human Document by W.H. Mallock, Mallock being a known disciple and former student of Ruskin. He was also an associate of the eccentric philosopher Howard Hinton, who in 1897 published What is the Fourth Dimension? And caught the eye of J.W. Dunn. Hinton describes a little model system of lines nearly upright but sloping in different directions, supposedly all connected to a rigid framework. Were such a thought adopted, wherein all that has ever come into being, or will ever coexist, passing slowly on, leaves in this flickering consciousness of ours, limited to a narrow space and a single moment, a tumultuous record of changes and vicissitudes that are but to us. As the implication of the intense excitement of the January morning encounter with this mediated space diminishes, as it surely must, I find myself seated at a table representing Latham's hollow belly, those once delirious monologues that passed for conversation, as his son describes it, and as I briefly experienced, were overwhelmingly insistent in this enfolded silence. Digital business continued elsewhere. It's the presence of absence that makes hairs crawl on the neck, presence in absence, until I convince myself that a dialogue with John Latham can be initiated by the act of lifting random volumes from the shelf, the uneaten charity books waiting to become conceptual art. Those are the books. The pocket edition of The Tragedy of Hamlet from 1928 has got a penciled diagonal rivulet that might have been sketched by Tom Phillips. Certain phrases have been very lightly redacted, yet the unshaped one of it doth move, and botch the words up fit to their own thoughts. James Joyce by Richard Ellman, 1959. His English sojourn was coming to an end. He and Nora disliked Camden Grove, which Joyce said was inhabited by mummies, and was probably Camden Grave. Space and Time in the Modern Universe by P.C.W. Davis featured a very exciting errata slip. Page 20, line 11. Anti-clockwise should read clockwise. Page 30, figure caption. Paul's journey takes 11.56 seconds each way and not 10. There is also a Scottish dictionary compiled by Captain Thomas Brown in 1845. Flat equals a floor of a house. Flea, E-E, equals a flea. Fleeing equals flying. To felg, to affright or frighten. The flea, staggering from the juice of an eye, is flown in the night. Fright lies motionless on the floor. Surely Blake as a child saw this man in age as he passed this way, crushed by the dimensions and gravity of an open door. His bard is tearing down a curtain of vegetation to reach the envelope of text printed on the back of that rectangle, the white mirror. John Latham discovered the medium in glass. To Hinton there was no qualitative difference between the time dimension and the dimension of space. His travelling field would thus be a constituent of the universe which existed independently of the existence of any individual observer. You cannot nail every particle of dust to the wall, or varnish the pigtail until it grows into bulbs on the spine. The fatal sisters have fish-scale corsets and the wrong feet. What is less than nothing is nothing still. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. That brings us to the end. Thank you so much again for coming out on quite a foul night for what I thought was a really amazing series of readings. I look forward to seeing those who are coming on Wednesday for our walk through Peckham. Niall and I are going to lead you out, or be led by Blake, out into Peckham. And also this time next week we'll have the next three poets performing in this space as well. And just to remind you, the booklet is available as well, so you can take away some of the poems by each of the poets as well. Just speak to Gareth or someone else, you can buy a copy of that. I think it's £4. And just finally, please join me in putting your hands together for Karen Sandhu, Niall Mcdevitt, Sandhu Iain Sinclair.